Demonology Warlock just got a second rework on the War Within Alpha, and right now it might just very well be the best design spec in the game, which is weird because I've said that about Fire Mage, but now I take it back because you are actually the Lord Supreme Commander of the Demons with Doom Guards, a reworked Vilefiend, Tyrant actually good, and the hero talent is just making it exactly what we all wanted for every spec when it comes to everything coming in the War Within. So let's kick it off by talking about the fact that the spec talent tree is just a different beast. Just look at this. Do you remember the old layout of the nodes? Because I do, because it was horrible. Now it's looking like an actual good talent tree with so many pathing. There's so many good things that changed for the talent tree that I don't even know where to begin, since funny enough, we had a video about the last rework of Demonology that's gone to shit now because it's no longer current information, but I did kind of trash it a little bit. So now it's very nice to see that you actually have identity in the spec talent tree, where you have all of the imp nodes more or less together on the left-hand side of the tree. Dreadstalkers, right side with middle, Felguard, right side with bottom. And probably one of the biggest change that came to Demonology is that there are actually 0 2 talent point nodes. This was one of the biggest issues that Warlock had in general. Demonology very high up there, I think just second after Destro or something like that, with the most amounts of 2-point nodes, or maybe third after BM Hunter or something. It now has 0 2 nodes talent. I cannot tell you how engaging it is to open up your talent tree and just start putting a point in all of the cool stuff that you want to get, feeling like they're little apples hanging down a branch, and you just pick one that you like. Oh, and I like that one, and I picked that one as well. This is the future and how all spec talent trees should be with the current design of the classes, and how the devs want the talent tree to impact the evolution of your spec as you have either level up or just simply pick it up at max level to try to figure out exactly what you want to play. That aside, Doom has been reworked twice. But you don't need to know about the old, silly, boring version of Doom. You need to know about the current version of Doom, where now Doom is on the bottom left-hand side of the tree, replacing where the old Nether portal section used to be. And it's a 30-second cooldown button that inflicts impending doom upon the target, dealing a lot of shadow damage immediately and more shadow damage at the end to that target and all the other targets within 10 yards, with, soft cap at around 8 targets. Consuming a demonic core will reduce the duration of doom by 3 seconds. This is a mechanic you will see in the hero talents as well, where you put something on the target and the effect only happens when the duration expires, and you can accelerate that duration more, like we've had with the tier set right now in Dragonflight, and then boom, shit explodes for a lot of damage. Now, that is already a big upgrade to the old version of Doom, but that's not all. We also have Impending Doom as an upgrade to the current Doom. Increases the damage of Doom by 30%, which is quite a bit, and Doom generates 1 soul shard upon expiration. This just adds an extra layer of engagement with your rotation that you need to have. First of all, you probably want to kind of keep track of when Doom is about to expire, so you don't overcap soul shards. You don't want to be at 5 soul shards when Doom expires, because you're just wasting that extra soul shard. And keeping that in mind is something that kind of Demonology needs, because there's not a lot going with Demonology in your basic rotation. And not to mention that once that Doom expires and you just get your soul shard, is just a cool moment of like, oh, resource, right? And we need those types of moments for more specs. And this is not even the coolest part. Probably the coolest part, ironically, is not even the capstone, but is Doom Eternal. Demonic Core reduces the duration of Doom by an additional 2 seconds, which just gives it a lot more uptime, but also when Doom is removed, its cooldown is reset. One of the biggest concerns that we've had, because this is supposed to replace kind of like the tier that we have now, was the fact that you just had Doom once every 30 seconds and that was it. And if you accelerate the rate at which Doom enacts its mechanic, it doesn't really make a big difference, considering that you accelerating its duration does not really impact what the spell does. You still get the same amount of damage and you still cast it just as often, until you actually pick this Doom Eternal, which completely changes how Doom functions, to the point where I think that maybe Doom Eternal should kind of be baked into the baseline ability, but I feel like that might be a little bit too much. and that would just make the ability a pretty much is the guaranteed pick. And of course, you get the capstone, which is the creme de la creme. Pact of Ered Ruin. When Doom expires, you summon a Doom Guard that casts 5 Doom Bolts when departing, and each Doom Bolt deals quite a bit of damage. Now, I've tested this in game as well, and it seems like this might be the biggest source of AoE damage that your spec can do, outside of maybe Implosion. Maybe you don't even have to play Implosion with the new Demonology. And that's just Doom. Tyrant has also been slightly reworked in the sense that it's been moved to the middle side of the talent tree, where it's way more accessible and no longer close to being a capstone, considering that pretty much everything revolves around Tyrant with Demonology, not only the spec itself but also the hero talents. So it being in the middle just makes it have almost no friction whatsoever when it comes to building what you want to build with your Tyrant. It's a 1 minute cooldown, so no longer a 1.5 minute cooldown, making it align way better with the overall rotation. Not to mention Grimoire Felguard, that for a long time was a little bit of a weird synergy between the two talents, but they would never align their cooldowns properly. The Soulbound Tyrant has been removed completely from the spec, which might not be that bad of a thing, considering that if you play any one of the hero talents, your soul shard economy is definitely going to change slightly, and you won't really feel the lack of it, outside maybe Soul Harvester, but we will get to that in a second. And Reign of Tyranny is just a 1-point node just underneath it, where it just does what Reign of Tyranny still does. We no longer have the Grand Warlock's design, by the way, because, you know, Tyrant is just a 1 minute cooldown now, so that's just fine. But the biggest takeaway is that you only need 2 talent points to just get everything related to Tyrant. Now, in place of Tyrant, we now have Vilefiend, which has been reworked as a whole new different ability. Almost whole new different ability. It's currently a 30-second cooldown, and you summon a Vilefiend for 15 seconds that does its thing. That's kind of the same Vilefiend that you have now, until you keep going down. You have Foul Mouth, increase Vilefiend damage by 20%, and your Vilefiend's Bile Spit, which is its ability, now applies Wicked Maw. Wicked Maw is a new talent that was added in the last rework, which is now all the way to the top right part of the talent tree, which makes Dread Bite cause the target to take 20% additional Shadow Flame damage from your spells and abilities for the next 12 seconds. I don't remember what the previous name of this was. I think it was just Dread Lash or whatever. It's whenever you summon the dogs, they debuff the enemy to take more shadow damage. Now, Vilefiend also does the same thing, and you don't need to take Wicked Maw to get this effect, most likely. And that's the semi-cool part. The best cool part is the actual capstone, which is Mark of Shatug and Mark of Faharg. These are the talents that were added in the last rework, and they were just passive damage increase for your demons that made no sense, but now they've been completely reworked. Picking one of these will change your Vilefiend into one of these 2 demons, which, if you remember, were the old Antorus bosses. Shatug is essentially the single target version of this, where your summon Vilefiend becomes summon Gloomhound and learns the following ability, Gloom Slash. Tooth and Claw are drenched in malignant shadow magic, causing the Gloomhound melee attacks to deal a lot of shadow damage over 6 seconds. If this effect is reapplied, any remaining damage will be added to the new Gloom Slash. This will of course be your raid option for Vilefiend if you do end up picking Vilefiend. The Faharg talent is actually the AoE version, unsurprisingly, and it turns your Vilefiend into Charhound that has the ability Infernal Presence, cloaked in the ever-burning flames of the abyss, dealing a little bit of fire damage but to all targets within 10 yards every 1 second, and it doesn't seem to be AoE capped, which is probably fine considering that you only have this once every 30 seconds. This just makes this ability way more interesting, an actual cool demon, and adds some much needed flavor to the overall rotation. You also have another capstone called the Houndmaster's Gambit. Your Dreadstalkers deal 50% increased damage while your Vilefiend is active. The 50% damage increase is pretty significant, especially if you put a lot of other points into augmenting your Dreadstalkers even more, which would make pairing these up really significant for your rotation. I'm not sure if this would end up having to hold one or the other to make sure that they both are casted at the same time, but if you do end up casting them at the same time and buffing them with the Tyrant, the damage increase is pretty nuts. And outside of this, pretty much all of the concerns that I personally had, and probably a lot of other Warlocks had as well, have been addressed. The boring flat nodes have been made into 1-point nodes and scattered throughout the talent tree as they are relevant and make sense for their particular effect. Stuff like Umbral Blaze and Pact of the Imp Mother are 1-pointers to the left-hand side where Hand of Gul'dan is usually receiving its buffs from, and you know, they affect imps, which are also on the left-hand side of the talent tree. New talents like Demonic Brutality and improved demonic tactics that affect your Felguard and your overall damage are just on the right-hand side of the talent tree, also 1-pointers, because They were not all one-pointers before. And the identity of the talent tree is just way clearer with less frictions and more paths available. You clearly have imps that are good for easy single target and AoE with implosion on the left-hand side of the talent tree. Dreadstalkers are the fun interactive version of your demonology with both single target and AoE application. Pretty much all of them have single target and AoE applications. Felguard, it's just the simple passive way of playing demonology with all pure passive damage boosters to your Felguard if you are a new demonology or you don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of having to summon and control all of these demons. Tyrant is just the biggest payoff moment that demonology has, and it's accessible with no friction to get. Doom is an awesome augmented playstyle that you can add to any one of your playstyles currently to make your rotation way more fun, similar to Vilefiend as well. Another semi-payoff moment that is redesigned, and it just alters how you play and engage, and not to mention the visual effect is really cool. Almost as cool as our stream at twitch.tv/Marcelian&Online, where we play all of the specs on alpha and test them all live with you guys and discuss all of the changes for World of Warcraft. Not to mention, we actually do keys and raids with viewers, so you can check out our stream, have a chat, hit a follow, and actually play with us whenever we get to do some keys and raids. And also, we do have a big project coming up on our streams that you may want to know about, so leave a follow, and we'll see you. Moving into Diabolist, the probably best visual effect in the game currently when it comes to hero talents. This just elevates your level of gameplay when it comes to demonology, particularly with its ritual mechanic. Diabolic Ritual essentially makes spending a soul shard grant you this ritual for 20 seconds. While Diabolic Ritual is active, each soul shard spent reduces its duration by 1 second. Remember the Doom mechanic that we mentioned. When Diabolic Ritual expires, you gain Demonic Art, causing your next soul shard spending ability to summon an Overlord, Mother of Chaos, or Pit Lord that unleashes a devastating attack against your enemies. On its own, that's just really cool because you summon these big demons with massive visual impact that just deal a lot of damage. And of course, you get to augment this a little bit more. First of all, Cloven Souls is pretty passive and it doesn't really change much. Enemies damaged by your Overlord have their souls cloven, increasing the damage taken from you and your pets by 5% for 15 seconds. That's great, but the cool part starts with Secrets of the Coven. Mother of Chaos empowers your next Shadow Bolt to become Infernal Bolt. Infernal Bolt just deals a lot more damage, but more importantly, it generates 3 soul shards. I don't have to overstate how impactful this is for demonology, considering that the most soul shards you can gain at once is 2 from a demonic core proc. Having 3 instantly means you probably go into Hand of Gul'dan, Shadow Bolt, Hand of Gul'dan, which is something that you don't normally ever do on demonology. That change of the rotation just adds engagement and a little bit of a alteration to how you're playing your predictable demonology rotation when it comes to shard economy. And of course, Ruination, the capstone of Diabolist. When you summon your Pit Lord that does its own thing and it looks giga badass, your Hand of Gul'dan changes and transforms into Ruination, which will be free, it will not eat up your soul shards, and it will still summon 3 wild imps. And the meteor that it summons down does oh so much damage that you will see your screen and your mobs explode. This is probably the most satisfying single spell that you can press on your Warlock or any World of Warcraft class to this day. And of course, the hero talent has a lot of utility and defensive options that you can go through that are choice nodes usually, and they can just be altered and chosen based on the content that you want to do. The cooler parts are also related to the Tyrant, which have almost no friction whatsoever, considering Tyrant is way more accessible right now, and I'm talking about the choice node of Cruelty of Xursen and Infernal Machine, where Cruelty of Xursen just makes summoning Demonic Tyrant grant Diabolic Ritual and reduces duration by 3 seconds, while Infernal Machine, your soul shard spending abilities decrease the duration of Diabolic Ritual by 1 additional second while your Demonic Tyrant is currently active, giving you that Demonic Tyrant window where everything is accelerated, you summon more demons, powerful abilities hit faster and faster and faster, retaining some of that demonology high-speed fantasy. Abyssal Dominion has also been reworked. If you already were familiar with the old version that implied you having to use Grim or Felguard, now it just affects your Tyrant. and it makes summoning Demonic Tyrant be empowered even more, dealing 70% increased damage and increasing the damage of your demons by 20% while active, which is very reminiscent of all demonology mechanics that we've had in the past. First of all, the Tyrant currently doesn't do as much damage as it used to, but with this node, it goes back to dealing significant damage on its own and not just an extension of your demons. Empowering your demons was also, I think, something that Tyrant used to do. If anything, was an ability that we did have in Legion, and it was moved to the Tyrant. I think it was taken away from the Tyrant and then just made the Tyrant extend your demons. Now you get all of those back with Abyssal Dominion, giving you the old flavor of Demonic Tyrant. Sad that we have to go for a hero talents for this, but it's still a cool thing to play with. And Soul Harvester just makes it difficult to decide which of the two hero talents feels better to play. It has its really unique visuals through the demonic soul mechanic. A demonic entity now inhabits your soul, allowing you to detect if a soul shard has a succulent soul when it's generated. Let me translate this for you. Your next Hand of Gul'dan is a succulent soul. It's just going to be an empowered Hand of Gul'dan. A succulent soul empowers your next Hand of Gul'dan, reducing its soul shard cost by 1, summoning 1 additional wild imp, and unleashes your demonic soul to deal additional shadow damage. This again plays with your shard economy, where your Hands of Gul'dan will be cheaper by 1, and normally since you cast 3 shards Hands of Gul'dan, your Hand of Gul'dan will essentially be a 2 shard cost now, and it will summon 4 imps. And imps will be a pretty big part of the Soul Harvester talent tree, considering that you have stuff like Mantle of the Harvester. Wild imp damage is increased by 5%, and wild imps that are imploded have an additional 5% chance to grant a demonic core, considering that you're likely going to have way more imps playing a Soul Harvester than playing Diabolist, for instance. You'll have higher chances of getting the demonic core procs. And all of this culminates with the Shadow of Death capstone, where your Demonic Tyrant grants the Shadow of Death buff for 15 seconds. And while you have this buff on, casting Hand of Gul'dan always invokes your Demonic Soul, and your Demonic Soul deals 10% damage, meaning you gain the benefits of that empowered Hand of Gul'dan with every cast that you do. These have some interesting game implications, where it's kind of reminiscent of the Nether Portal, where you just want to cast as many Hands of Gul'dan as possible. This might also mean that you might want to either pull soul shards just before casting your Tyrant, or at least pull demonic core procs to instantly get shards as fast as possible in your Demonic Tyrant window to cast as many Hands of Gul'dan as possible. I still don't know if you want to cast full shards Hand of Gul'dan, or maybe even 1 shard Hand of Gul'dan will be good enough. So it could turn into the cast 1 Shadow Bolt, 1 Hand of Gul'dan, 1 Shadow Bolt, 1 Hand of Gul'dan type mechanic. At the very least, even if this Hand of Gul'dan is only 1 shard, it will act as a 2 shard Hand of Gul'dan, considering that Demonic Soul will be the mechanic around its current thing. So that's interesting and definitely changes the flow and the vibe of your overall pretty predictable rotation for Demonology. There are a lot of other cool stuff about Soul Harvester. One thing that you will notice is the Soul Anathema mechanic that's going to be a very significant part of your damage. Unleashing your Demonic Soul bestows a fiendish entity onto the soul of its targets, dealing shadow damage over 10 seconds. If this effect is reapplied, any remaining damage will be added to the new Soul Anathema, so you don't waste your dot damage. And lastly, probably some of the more underlooked talents are the choice node Shared Fate and Feast of Soul. Shared Fate makes it so that when you kill a target, its tortured soul is flung into nearby enemies for 3 seconds. This effect inflicts quite a bit of shadow damage to enemies within 10 yards every 1 second, and effect is reduced beyond 8 targets. The Feast of Souls, when you kill a target, you have a chance to generate a soul shard that is guaranteed to be a succulent soul, giving you that demonic soul mechanic once again, guaranteed on your next Hand of Gul'dan. These are all cool, and the mechanics seem to be fairly strong if you can reliably kill a lot of targets. But fret not, because that changes with Quietus, the next talent in the tree, making Soul Anathema damage increase by 25%, that's great, and it's dealt 20% faster. More importantly, consuming a demonic core activates Shared Fate or Feast of Souls, so whichever mechanic you end up going for, once you just blast demonic bolts onto your target by consuming those demonic cores, you just get either of these to effect. You can either just go for incredibly insane AoE damage bursts with Shared Fate, or you just constantly play into your demonic soul mechanic with Feast of Souls. Either way, the rotation implications are just exquisite enough to not feel like you have to relearn a whole new spec, but to also feel like, oh, this is a new thing for Demonology that I just kind of do the same thing, but slightly different, and when it procs, I really want to do it to be able to get as much benefit from it as possible. The overwhelming feedback reception that Demonology has had has turned this spec around almost a 180 from its previous iteration to what it is now. And the reworks for the War Within Alpha don't stop here. Death Knight has also received one most recently with Frost Death Knight that has had some pretty crazy changes as well, bringing it closer and closer to a modern version of World of Warcraft. And we made a video that you can check right now and embrace yourself in the darkness of the World of Warcraft edgy classes. Death Knight.